What does it mean to come out of Babylon? What does it mean to redeem the bride? Wow, this was an interesting study, and it's going to dovetail with Doug Hamp's earlier talk today. When the Lord first began speaking to Israel through Hosea, he said to him, "Go and marry a prostitute, so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution. This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods." Man, I feel sorry for that poor guy. Man, that's a rough deal. God's like, yeah, tell me about it. You want to know what I've been through? Tell you what, dude. Go marry a prostitute. No, it's not a suggestion. I'm telling you, go marry a prostitute. Now, I'm going to let you know what I'm going through here. Yeah, Hosea continues. Yet the time will come when Israel's people will be like the sands of the seashore, too many to count. That's what I think is the brilliant part of God's plan with the diaspora. Even though it was a punishment, it was a brilliant move, strategy. Because this is the way I see the Tower of Babel. I believe Hebrew was the original language. I believe Hebrew was the language of God. And that at the Tower of Babel, it was split into 70 languages. And so I kind of envision it like, okay, Satan, God's kind of looking at him and saying, okay, you want to take me on? Fine. I'll give you 69, I'll take one, give it your best shot. Let's go. So the devil takes over 69 nations, right? 69 people groups. God's got one, the Hebrews. He starts with Abram, one guy. God starts with Abram, and the devil starts with Nimrod. And we see how Nimrod becomes known by many other names as a result of the Tower of Babel. And so he still, after the Tower of Babel, he was king of the world. Do you think he just gave it up because the languages changed? No, he learned the languages and learned how to continue to rule over everybody else.
Well, that's why there's so much symbolism.
All the symbolism is the same everywhere. Absolutely, exactly. So you've got this powerful piece on the chessboard, Nimrod, that the devil's working with. He's got this little pawn over here, Abram, that God leverages in such a way, even through all the disobedience and everything else, and where the northern tribes disobey, and he disperses them into the 69. Where they continue to do bad things, they continue to be corrupted, but the time comes, and we'll get to it later in this presentation, when Ephraim wakes up in the pig pen and said, what have I gotten myself into? But by this time, he's multiplied into a multitude of nations, and he's spread all over the world, waiting for the Exodus that's going to make the one of Moses pale in comparison. That's going to be an extraordinary deal when God says, okay, now that all my people have just popped up in the 69 all over the world, I'm bringing them in now. Oh, man, that's going to be cool. Then, at the place where they were told, you are not my people, it will be said, you are children of the living God. Then the people of Judah and Israel will unite together. How many people do you see there? 2 groups, right? That's the 2-house thing. That's where it all starts out right there. I'm in total agreement with Doug Hamp on this. They will choose one leader for themselves. They will return from exile together. Has that happened yet? Nah. What a day that will be, the day of Jezreel, when God will again plant his people in his land. Who's going to do it? Oh, so you mean it's not the Rothschilds, the Zionists, the Freemasons, United Nations? Oh, okay. Interesting. If you haven't seen this teaching, I suggest you look it up. I think it's still online out there. I know that some of the videos of Jim Staley have been pulled down and stuff, but that teaching right there radically changed my life. When I watched it, I wept like a baby because it was like all this. I had this puzzle on the floor, and there were so many pieces missing. I just couldn't understand, and he just dumped them all on the floor, and most of them fell into place. Just when he dumped it on the floor, I'm like, wow! Look at that! I mean, I still have the whole picture, but I got a lot of it, and it's starting to make sense to me. And then I followed that up with this one right here, The Era of Dispensationalism by 119 Ministries. That is where a lot of things began to change for me, because I was a hardcore preacher, rapture dispensationalist, fundamental independent Baptist, King James guy. Lots of things began to change after that. And I'm glad I watched it in this order, and I would suggest you do the same. This helps you figure out who you are, and then this helps you purge a lot of the stuff that you were kind of messed up with for when you didn't know who you were. And then I would follow it up with this one right here. Yeah, 119. Steve Mutcher is nailed to the cross. Man, I had I was talking with somebody, Alexander, when we were at lunch. He's got your foot in the boot there, and I had mine in a boot not a few years ago. And he asked me what happened to me. I said, well, I was in a mad rush. I wanted to go see Star Trek when it came out. Ran down the stairs, missed the last one, busted my foot in like 3 places. Had to have a plate and 8 screws put in. And so as a result, I didn't see the movie, and I was laid up in bed and on painkillers and stuff that Shabbat that was that weekend. So I couldn't go with the rest of my wife and everybody to the home fellowship that we go to on Saturdays. And so I was like, well, I'll find somebody else to watch in bed, while I'm laying there. And I was surfing that, and I think it either just come out or it just was the first thing that popped up. Anyway, I watched that one, and if I thought this one went off, for me, that was like a nuclear bomb for me. That just, maybe it was the painkillers, but I could not stop crying. It was uncontrollable. It's so powerful. You need to watch it. We don't have time to go into it so much, but I highly recommend these 3 videos right there. And again, all of this is to illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods. And we see as a result of that in Jeremiah chapter 3 that the northern kingdom was issued a divorce. And I always wondered why the southern kingdom wasn't divorced too. But then I realized, well, there were promises that were made that God couldn't annul. So even though Judah was just as bad, he's like, I've got to put up, if not worse, I've got to put up with Judah because I've got to bring my son through Judah. I've got to do all kinds of stuff that's got to happen through Judah. So, I'm bound by my own word to keep that thing going, even though I'm not too happy with it. But the north, I have no obligation to do that. And I'm sick of your whoring around and divorce. Okay. Then you get to, when you start understanding identity crisis and what Jim Staley was teaching in that and stuff, and you start reading the scriptures, specifically the New Testament and the stories of Yeshua, the parables take on whole new meaning. All kinds of stuff starts popping out like you never saw before. And you realize that he's standing there in Judea talking to the Jews. He says, I only come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. How many houses are there? 2. He's in the house of Judah. And he says, I've only come for the house of Israel. Oh, what's all that about? Then you start thinking, well, man, if, as most of us were taught, the church didn't show up until 50 days after the resurrection at Pentecost, or how many of you grew up with, the church was at Pentecost? Well, that's true, it was at Pentecost, but not the one in Acts 2. It was the Pentecost of Mount Sinai. That's when the church showed up. That's when the church was married. That's when the church was created. That's why Stephen in Acts 7 says the church in the wilderness, the ecclesia, same word. So how does this make sense then? If that's your belief system, if you believe the church didn't show up until Acts chapter 2, how does it make sense where Paul says in Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, when it hadn't even come into existence yet? When it didn't even show up until 50 days later. That doesn't make sense. And then you talk to your Christian brothers and sisters and say, oh, the feasts and all that stuff, that's just for the Jews. Oh, really? When did the church begin? It began on Pentecost. A feast? Let that sink in for a minute. Yeah. Well, Doug talked about the scripture a little bit, and his Deuteronomy 24 lays out a law that if a husband divorces his wife and she goes to be with another, and even if that person dies or whatever, the first husband can never take her back again because it's a violation of his own law. It's an abomination. He can't do it. And yet, when you look at the prophets, you see, it says that I've divorced Israel, you're a whore and all that stuff, but I'm going to win her back again. The prophets keep talking about Yahuwah is going to take back his divorced bride. See the problem?
Somebody has to die.
God created a law that said you can't do that. So when Paul says the mystery of the church, Paul's the guy that figured this out. If you understand what's going on in the book of Hosea, and you read Deuteronomy 24, Jeremiah chapter 3 with the divorce, read the entire book of Hosea, and then go read Romans chapter 7 through 11, you understand what Paul has figured out. It wasn't that the church was concealed in the Old Testament, revealed in the New Testament. No, the church was there from Sinai. It's a church in the wilderness. Stephen knew that. He said it. Church was known. It's the assembly. The mystery is, how could God divorce and take her back without violating his own law? That's the mystery. Paul figured it out. And you know that because he starts quoting pretty liberally from the book of Hosea. So you really have to read the book of Hosea to understand what's going on here. We have the bill of divorce right there in Jeremiah chapter 3. The only way the husband could take back the bride he had divorced without breaking his own law, Deuteronomy 24, would be to die for her. I believe this was the great mystery that Paul had figured out concerning the church. And one of the reasons why I say this is one of the scriptures that I would use is 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 39. The wife is bound by the law. Which law? The whole thing or the law of the husband? Right? The law of the husband-wife deal. As long as her husband lives. But if her husband is dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will. Only in the Lord. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. Romans chapter 7. Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law. Who's he writing this to? Romans. Right? So when you look at who the apostles went to, especially if you read some of the books like Fox's Books of Martyrs and stuff like that, where you see where all the disciples went after Christ had ascended, like Thomas, I think, died in India. Why did these guys go to the places they go to? They just kind of, roll a dice and say, India, I think I'll go to India. No, they were going. They were going to where they knew the lost tribes were. They weren't really lost. They were dispersed, but everybody knew where everybody was. Where's Paul always going to? He's going to the synagogue. He's going to the synagogue in Ephesus and Corinth, in Thessalonica, and all these different places. Well, what's a synagogue doing in Gentile lands? You ever think about that? Because these are Israelites that are in the diaspora, and the disciples knew where they were. So Paul's writing to some of these guys in Romans, and he's saying, I'm speaking to those of you guys who know the law. Why would a Gentile pagan Greek have any understanding of the Torah? They wouldn't, but those in the diaspora would. How that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth? For the woman which hath a husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. So then, if while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress, as long as the guy's alive. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. Wherefore, my brethren, ye also are become dead to the law. Which law? The context is the law of the husband-bride situation, not the whole Torah. Starts right at the beginning. I'm telling you guys who understand this. You become dead to that law, the law by the body of Christ, that you should be married to another. To who? Even to him who is raised from the dead. The whole context is the husband has to die. Who are they free to remarry? The one who raised from the dead. That's what it says. That we should bring forth fruit unto God. Now that's all King Jimmy. So I think the Holman Christian Standard Bible kind of just renders that a little easier to understand. Chapter 7, verse 4. Therefore, my brothers, you also were put to death in relation to the law through the crucified body of the Messiah, so that you may belong to another, to him who was raised from the dead, that we may bear fruit for God. You guys starting to get it? That's the greatest love story ever told. That's extraordinary. Hosea 2. O Israel, I will wipe the many names of Baal from your lips, and you will never mention them again. Oh, by the way, Baal is a word that has a meaning, and the meaning of the word Baal is Lord. Now, Adonai also means Lord. The problem is, everywhere you see capital L-O-R-D, it's not there to represent the Hebrew word Adonai. It's replacing the word Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahuwah. Okay, the Lord. There is a name that means the Lord, and it's not Yahuwah. It's Baal. He says, I'm going to wipe the names of Baal or Baal from your lips, and you will never mention them again. On that day I will make a covenant with all the wild animals and the birds of the sky and the animals that scurry along the ground, so they will not harm you. I will remove all weapons of war from the land. Has that happened yet? No. All right. All swords and bows, so you can live unafraid in peace and safety. Has that happened yet? No. I will make you my wife forever, showing you righteousness and justice, unfailing love and compassion. I will be faithful to you and make you mine, and you will finally know me, not as the Lord. He just said he's going to remove that. You will finally know me as Yahuwah.
Yes.
This is one of those scriptures that, like many others, it drives me crazy. I am the Lord. The Lord is my name. No! I am Yahuwah. Yahuwah is my name. In vain means to basically bring to nothing, to nullify, to replace it with a title, which is what we've all done. So he says, I'm going to remove the names of Baal, that means Lord, and you will finally call me the Lord, right? Right. No. One of the reasons I believe Baal is a representation of Nimrod is because when you look at various depictions of some of the ancient gods of the ancient world, there's a lot of very close similarities. You have Baal right here in the same pose as Orion. Orion's a mighty hunter. What was Nimrod called in the Bible?
Mighty hunter.
Right? Gilgamesh, with the lion, Ninurta. You also see a lot of depictions of him usually associated with the lion, who's also referred to as lion of the tribe of Judah. Right? So you've got these two opposing characters, Christ and Antichrist. Right? You're going to finally forget the Baals of the world, the Nimrod, all that stuff, and finally recognize Yahuwah. Hosea 2, 22 through 23. Then the Lord will answer the thirsty cries of the grain, the grapevines, and the olive trees, and they in turn will answer Jezreel. God plants, that's what Jezreel means. At that time I will plant a crop of Israelites. Who's going to do it? He says, I. He's going to do it. And raise them for who? Himself. I will show love to those I called not loved, and to those I called not my people, I will say, now you are my people. And they will reply, you are our God. How do I know that Paul understood this? Because that's what he's quoting in Romans chapter 11. In Romans 11, he's talking about, for I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery. What mystery? The whole divorce and remarriage thing. Lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to who? Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Well, the fullness of the Gentiles, all you have to go to figure that out is go to, I think it's, was it Genesis 48? Where Jacob crosses his arms over Ephraim and Manasseh. And where he says, yeah, I know my son, I know, which one's the oldest and all that stuff. And he prophesies, gives a prophecy for Manasseh, but he says, the younger is going to be greater and all this stuff. And prophesies over Ephraim that he would become the multitude of nations. The fullness of the Gentiles. That's what's going on right there. Until the fullness of the Gentiles, Israel, the northern tribes, will come back in. So then all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Sion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. I saw this graphic online, kind of modified it a little bit to clarify it. Hold that, I want to keep going or I'll get behind. This right here is the perfect illustration to show us who we are. There's if you want to say the Hebrew roots, there's a tree that is Israel. But if blood-born Israelites reject Yeshua, what happens to their branch? Broke off, thrown away. Then over here, you got pagan root Gentiles. We believe in Yeshua. What happens to our branch? We get grafted in. It's not rocket science. If believing Israel, if Israelites decide to believe in him, what do you think happens to their branch? Back in. And Paul talks about that. He's like, if he's able to take the natural branches, and put you in, don't get too excited, because if he's able to do that with them, don't you think he could do the same thing to you? This is it. This describes the church, who the church is, what the church is, the cultivated olive tree. And there's two sticks. I wrote a blog a while back called Pick a Stick, because there's only two. There's not a little third twig over here called the church somewhere. There's a stick of Judah and a stick of Ephraim. All right? Once you understand that, you realize God has one people, one bride, and one plan. I used to be one of those guys that thought that there was two brides. The Yahuwah had a bride, that's Israel, and the Yeshua has a bride, and that's the church. And like we talked about, and I think Doug mentioned it too, the belief, and when you break it down, this is what the preacher of rapture belief is. Yeshua, it's this good cop, bad cop scenario, right? There's the wife beater and there's the guy who loves everybody. And Yeshua's going to take his bride and it's all going to be great and they're going to have a party for 7 years. And meanwhile, Yahuwah is going to come down and beat the snot out of his wife for 7 years until she loves him again. That's kind of crude, but that's what we believe if you break it down. When I was in that paradigm, that's exactly what we believed. We'd never word it that way, but it drives the point home. And actually, John Nelson Darby, who I believe is the originator of dispensation theology, actually understood this. He had his own translation. You want to talk about a cult leader? Oh, man. This guy has every definition there is of a cult leader. And to the point where he's like, okay, I'm going to create my own translation of the Bible, the Darby translation, so I can get all my theories into it that I want. But when he translated Genesis chapter 48, he actually translated and understood that the prophecy over Ephraim was the multitude of nations. The fullness of the Gentiles, another way of putting it. He understood that. But what's bizarre is when you start talking the way we've been talking here this weekend, many people who are in the dispensation camp will look at us and say, that's replacement theology. And I'm like, no. If you believe this, that's replacement theology. If you believe for thousands of years it was Israel, 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 cross, boom, church, that's replacement. You replace this with that. How can you not see that? I don't get it, man. But, I'm laughing at myself because I was in that camp. The me of 10 years ago would have fought with the me of today until both of us passed out of exhaustion and neither one of us would have convinced the other of anything. It's just a fact. So, oh, man. Yeah. Anyway, so this is, I already talked about this, the multitude of generations.
I'm sorry, I'm just
Again, Paul understood Hosea, where it talks about, the people who say, you're not my people, I will now say you are my people. In Romans chapter 9, he talks about, and we among those whom he selected, both from the Jews and the Gentiles. Concerning the Gentiles now, he says, parenthetically, it's like, okay, now concerning the Gentiles, God says in the book of Hosea, so we know where he's going with this, those who are not a people, I will now call my people, and I will love those whom I did not love before. That's how we know he's not just talking about Joe Blow pagan Greek. We know when he's talking about concerning the Gentiles, he says, he's quoting Hosea, and then he says what Hosea says. So we know specifically who he's talking about right there. Paul understood this totally. And that's what gets me so frustrated about the Hebrew Roots movement and people in it that want to throw Paul out. I'm like, are you kidding me? Paul gets it. And Paul passes the Deuteronomy 13 test with flying colors. But you only realize that if you know and understand what he read before you read what he wrote. True. And now I've begun to say, I've been in the Bible since I was able to read it my whole life. All right? I can say with absolute confidence that you should never read one sentence Paul wrote until you understand what Paul read. Because until you understand what he read, you'll never understand what he wrote. And you're going to twist and manipulate everything that Paul wrote and do what Peter said, warned against. Ignorant, unstable people twist and distort what he wrote and fall into the error of lawlessness. And that's exactly what's happening in the Christian church. And I was one of those people who would have taught the same thing. In fact, I did teach a whole lecture. I said, okay, you want to go back under the law? Fine, pick up sticks on Saturday and see how that works for you. Quoting Numbers chapter 15. That was so stupid. But I was just as passionate and dogmatic then as I am right now. Which scares me because I could be saying this guy is so stupid 10 years from now. So, whatever. But that's why I said at the beginning of this, don't believe a thing I say. I'm up here teaching, but I'm not your teacher. I'm just a loudmouth student up here, blabbing out things that I think I know. I'm serious, man. This passage right here, oh, wow. Hosea chapter 3. Then the Lord said to me, go and love your wife again. Remember, he was told to go marry a prostitute. He's out sleeping around with other people. The reason why this hits me so hard is because my first marriage ended in divorce as a result of I came back from a 6-day business trip to an empty house, letter of divorce. My wife of 7 years is out sleeping with some other guy in Maine. And it just ripped my world apart. I mean, we were active together in church, taught Sunday school together. I wrote, directed, and played Jesus and Passion plays, and she played Mary, the whole deal. And wow, this just ripped me up. And for some time, shortly after all that happened, God kept putting homeless people in my path. And I really believe you reap and like kind to what you sow. You plant an apple seed, you're going to get an apple tree, right? You reap what you reap what you sow. I didn't realize it at the time that when he was putting these homeless people in my path to help, it was because I was about to become homeless. And I think he was testing me. I look back at it in hindsight and say, I wonder what would happen if I didn't help all those homeless people. Because when I was homeless, a lot of people did help me. But I have to believe it's because I actually helped a lot of homeless people, or at least several anyway, before that happened to me. So I was working for this guy. He had me running some errands. I had to go mail some packages. I had his van. And I see this homeless guy there. And I at that season, it was a rough time. That was the icing on a very bad cake, the divorce and everything. I was bankrupt and lost a lot of money. I was literally within a signature of a $70 million contract before I lost everything. And literally lost everything. And then when I finally crawled back out of that hole and made a little bit of money, and I had just cashed a check, I had the money in my pocket, I'm driving to the post office, there's a homeless guy, God says, give him all your money. I'm going, what? Am I hearing something? Yeah. But I really felt compelled that that's what I had to do. So I said, okay, Lord. And I do these little deals with God sometimes. I'm like, okay, here's the deal. I said, he just laughs at me, but that's the way it is, the way I think anyway. I said, I don't want to just enable somebody who's just going to use this money that I need, quite a bit of it, to go get drunk or use it on drugs or whatever. I said, if he's has a legitimate need, if this is a person who really has a need, let me just go in there and mail the packages and let him still be there. If he's just a vagrant, he's going to cause a problem, go get drunk or you get high or whatever, just have him walk off, And so I went in there and did my thing, and I came out, and he's standing in the same spot. Okay. All right. So I got the van because it was a really hot day, and there was air conditioning in the van. So I called the guy over, come over here, come sit in the van. So he kind of reluctantly didn't know what to do about that, but he came over and he sat in the van. I said, hey, man, I want to help you out, but first I want to hear your story. What's the deal? Why are you in this situation? And as he's telling me his story, it was my story. He was telling me my story. And so I start crying as he's telling his story. He's like, what's the matter? I said, you're where I'm about to be, bro. And he turns to me and says, you need to read the book of Hosea. I'm like, that's like Habakkuk, it's like, who reads that when you're a New Testament Bible believing Christian, I'm like, Hosea. And then this guy goes to preaching to me for like a half hour. I'm just sitting there, what? It's after it's over, I'm just like, here you go, dude, handing the money. We prayed together. He goes, let me pray for you. I said, he prays for me. And then he leaves, he gets out, and I'm just blown away by the whole encounter. And so I just said a quick prayer. I'm like, Lord, he was more for me than I was for him. Thank you. And that's all about all he said. And then I look, and I can't find him. I'm looking in the rearview mirror. I'm looking he's gone. So I'm thinking, is this one of those angels unaware things, It turns out it wasn't. He called me sometime later and told me where that seed what happened with that seed. It got him what he needed to do to get back on his feet. And later he had opened up a homeless ministry to help people in need. And he had contacted me to tell me that's hurting me right now. He just told me what that had done. But I couldn't receive this message in that season. I read the book of Hosea. Yeah, that's right, she's a whore. I get it. Okay, yeah, I get it. Stinking whore. Yeah. That's about all I got out of it. So, now we're talking like 2002, okay? You flash forward to about 2014 when I was really impressed to do this in-depth study that became the Yahuwah Triangle series. And I was impressed to really read the book of Hosea. And I had actually forgotten about that encounter. It was I'm reading through Hosea, and I get to this chapter right here, and I just snapped in half. And just like, oh man, God, you're awesome. Go and love your wife again, even though she commits adultery with another lover. This will illustrate that Yahuwah still loves Israel. Even though the people have turned to other gods and love to worship them. So I bought her back for 15 pieces of silver and 5 bushels of barley and a measure of wine. Then I said to her, you must live in my house for many days and stop your prostitution. During this time you will not have sexual relationships with anyone, not even with me. This shows that Israel will go a long time without a king or prince, and without sacrifices, sacred pillars, priests, or even idols. But afterward, the people will return and devote themselves to the Lord their God and to David's descendant, their king. In the last days, they will tremble in awe of Yahuwah and his goodness. I don't know about you guys, but I'm there. I am trembling in awe of Yahuwah and his goodness. And through the actual practical experience that I went through in my life, I have some small understanding of what was going on here. And then a number of years later, Yahuwah restored and brought me my bride. I said, my picker is broken. I'm not picking the next one. You're going to have to pick the next one because I can't pick right. So he did. He brought me into a full-time ministry. I became a missionary in January of 2004, and a few months later, August, a new beginning, eighth month, August. So that's cool, God. In the 8th month, there, 2004, he brought the woman that would become my bride-to-be into my life, and she had a 13-year-old son when we got married. And so I adopted him. And he was not a Garcia, or he was not a Skiba. Now he is a Skiba. I get it. Right? I was not a people. Now I am a people. My son didn't change his DNA. He has Garcia DNA going through his blood. But I have given him a new identity. He wears my name on his baseball jersey. He is heir to anything I have to leave for him, and anything my family has to offer is his. He is free to participate in every tradition my family has ever started if he so chooses. He can go the route of following his biological father if he wants. But I have given him a new identity that he can choose to accept. I believe that's exactly what's happened with us. And I thank God for the things, because I always said I didn't want kids. I love kids. I actually really love kids, but I know the style of life that I have always had. I'm always on the go. I'm always traveling. And my dad was a 9-to-5-er. My dad was always there for me. And I always said if I was going to be a dad, I wanted to be the kind of father my father was. But I knew that the type of lifestyle that I have and the ministry that I'm called to, I couldn't be that. But I end up marrying a woman who has a 13-year-old son, so I didn't have to do all that diapers and all the, I am now more on the coach side of things and can be the friend side of things and can be that for my son. But, he's 22 now, so he's off and doing his own thing, so I'm still free to travel, so God worked it all out. And then taught me a pretty powerful lesson as to who I am in him through this whole situation right here. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it on your favorite social media sites. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned and we'll see you back next time.